world, sorry. So we should formally get started with this session. Welcome to our Saturday Zoom session, which we've had one other of in the last month and a half or something due to holidays, etc. So we're back in the swing. And just in case you're not sure what's going on and you're feeling good, we have Clark Baker who's going to put a hex on all of that.
Ooh, nice.
I've been working at that. It still didn't come out well. Anyway, Clark's talked with us several times in the past, and
Wow.
And
something happened to me.
Yeah, and everybody. Somebody's sharing. Oh, that's Clark's thing. Clark's talked with us several times before, and I've known introductions in my usual style of poor introductions. I'm just going to introduce Clark as a friend. I've known for how many years, Clark? It's been quite a few.
Forever.
And a half.
Probably 75 or 76.
Oh, you're not that old.
Years?
No, 1975 or 76 is when we first met, would be my bet.
When did you get married?
80.
How many years ago?
1980 is when I got
80.
married.
Yeah, well, it was well before that. So there's this thing going around called hexagon squares, and some people love them, some people tolerate them, and some people know nothing about them. I'm halfway between the latter two. But it's a very popular thing, and when somebody suggested we do a session on hexagons, there were three names that popped up. I guess there's a gentleman in Southern California that uses them a lot. There's what I think hexagons, I think Clark Baker, because I thought he created them. And then I hear that both he and Bill Euler created them together and have gone on different tangents with it. And I've been meaning to call Bill, but I haven't yet. So anyway, without further rambling, Clark, why don't you tell us about hexagon squares?
Sure. So what I hope to have you come away with on this is at the end, you'll know what hexagons are and how you can dance, teach, and call them. You guys can all see the screen just fine, right?
Yes.
So what I want to do, and this is going to make me go back here, is this going to help me? Is I need to know a little bit about you guys. And what I'd like to know is who has danced hexagons. And maybe we can see that. I see one. Yeah, Don has. Yeah. And who hasn't danced hexagons? Who am I talking to who's new at that? Oh, good. What I'd hope to do is pick one of you, because I need to talk to you later. It doesn't have all your names on my screen. Who's one person who's going to be a victim for me where I can use them?
It depends what you mean by a victim.
I want someone who hasn't danced hexagons who I can, when I'm teaching on this chat here, I can ask them and they'll have their mic on and can respond.
Gotcha.
Who's willing to do that with me? Say a name.
I've seen them, but I haven't danced them.
I've danced them. I've taught them. I love them.
I'm just looking for one person who this is all new to on this chat who's willing to work with me today.
Well, thank you all for coming. That kills Clark's.
Somebody out there unmute yourself and say yes.
Say your name.
Well, I've not done any before, but if it's to see with what's on the screen, I'm having difficulty seeing what's on the screen. So if it's something I have to read, forget me.
So you can't read what I'm displaying on the screen right now.
Not very well. No, I've just had a cataract up now. I'm having difficulty reading things, but
Hold on.
Okay, Helen from Stockholm. I can.
Helen. Okay, I'm going to go with Helen.
Yep, yep. I don't know how this will go, but I will volunteer.
Okay. Thank you, Helen.
Okay.
Okay. So, all of you have learned to square dance. All of you have learned a variety of calls: 2-dancer, 4-dancer, 8-dancer calls. And all of you can dance to the calls of an unknown caller, you know, caller new to you. You can do it smoothly, with the music, rhythmically, and generally without making mistakes. And one of the fun parts of square dancing is we generally don't know what call's coming next. So for the purposes of today, let's assume that the choreography is symmetric. In other words, no couple number one do something type material. So those are the ground rules. And let's say you go into a hall that has, you know, 10 squares dancing, and you go in the back of the hall and you somehow collect yourselves 12 square dancers, and you square up, but you're in the shape of a hexagon. And the caller starts calling the material at the mainstream dance or the plus dance, whatever it is. What happens next? And the answer is your set, your hexagon, can dance all of the choreography. So first off, that's pretty amazing. That means that everything that works in square dancing in a square works in hexagon dancing. And it works at the same time and with essentially just one overriding rule of how you do it. So we're going to get into that. And what you'll notice at the end of each sequence in your hexagon, each head man will have a head lady as they promenade home. All the promenades will be the same distance, the same number of beats as all the other squares. And when you've promenaded home, every head couple will end on a head couple position.
Clark,
Go.
can you go back? I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you go back to that original picture you had of what a squared hex looks like?
There it is.
That
oh,
and show when you say you form a hexagon. I'm not sure it's obvious to everybody.
So there's
where
a
the heads
hexagon, a six-sided figure rather than a square, which is a four-sided figure. All the sides are equal. All the angles are equal. Sound good? Okay.
Whoops. And you have three head couples in a triangle and three
We'll
side
get to it. 3 head couples and 3 side couples. I'll talk about where they are and how you
Can you
arrange
blow it
and
up
what that
just a
means.
little bit because I can't see that well?
Yeah, I understand. Give me 1 sec.
Okay.
I want Zoom is at 150. I'm going to go to 200 and see how that works for you.
Okay, that works better for me. Yeah.
Okay. I'm happy with that. I can even go a little bigger if I think 300 is going to. Okay, let's go with 300 and see how that
I can
works.
read that now.
There you go. Well, thank you. Good. Okay.
Yeah, the square just went off the board, but that's okay.
So here we are. We've done this, and we're talking about the fact that this thing works and what worked and what didn't. And what worked is you danced all the choreography. What was a little odd is you didn't you didn't always get your partner back, but I will guarantee you that every head man ended up with a head lady for every promenade.
Right.
And that the promenades went for the same amount of time, the same number of steps. And that when you stopped after that number of steps, as the normal squares did, every head couple would end on a head couple position. So those are the guarantees I'm making. And what didn't work out is, in general, every head man will not always get their original partner, and they will not end up on their original square position. However, every head man will always have a head lady as his partner and promenade to one of the 3 head positions at the end of each sequence.
Does the
So,
is
go
the
ahead.
headman likely to promenade to a different headman position?
He's not more or less likely, just like he's not more or less likely to end up with his partner or the other ones.
Okay.
Mathematically, people can tell you for what your choreography did to the normal square, what will happen to the hexagon square. But and this example here that I've given is just one way in which we use hexagons, but it's the way that I like doing it. I like just getting a hexagon up in the back of the hall with 12 people who are interested, and we dance to whatever the caller's doing for the rest of the dancers.
Right.
Mark, I've interrupted twice and there's another
That's
question.
okay.
Do you want us to wait till the end and then do questions?
I'm hoping to make this a relatively quick talk. We'll see whether I pull that off. So we'll have lots of times for discussion and questions at the end. And I also am hoping to get into the actual what's going on in a hexagon for the people who don't know. I just wanted to lay the groundwork here.
Okay.
So, but Don, you
Okay.
should certainly interrupt if you think that if I'm confusing or didn't have something like what a hexagon is with that first picture. So that was good.
Well, with that said, Carol still has a question. Go ahead, Carol.
Go for it, Carol.
Yeah, just so, because I missed the first, I couldn't get onto it, so I missed the first
okay.
bit. So what I need to know, when you said hexagons, I always thought the ones that I've ever seen was two head couples on either side, and
Yep.
like more like a lozenge, if you like.
Right. Yes. A rectangle. Yeah.
Yes.
You're right. And I'm going to mention that at the end, but you're correct. Right off the bat, I should have said, we're talking about a hexagon like my picture here, and not the thing that most people are familiar with, which is four
so
head couples and two side couples.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Right.
So
Yeah.
alternates.
Yeah. Good point.
Okay.
Is there anything else basic that people are confused on so far, or should I keep going? I'm going to keep going.
Keep going.
Okay. So I've kind of given you this existence that this interesting thing can happen. So this idea that you get a hexagon up in the back of the hall and just dance is my favorite way to introduce people to hexagons. And it works if most of the dancers are experienced with hexagons and you're only adding 1, 2, or at most 3 new people into it. A second way to expose dancers to hexagons is to have them square up in hexagons, like get a whole hall, you're the caller on the stage, and you say, we're going to do some hexagons today, and you have a whole room full of hexagons, and then you either teach, walk, or dance, or some combination of all that, hopefully with music playing at times, to show them and teach the whole hall how to do it. So that's another way to do it. And when you do that, you can do it if you only have 12 people with a single hexagon, perhaps with you, the caller, in the middle of it. That's often what I would do at Caller Lab after midnight, just to show people what's going on. Or you can do it with a room full of dancers with the caller on the stage. And after this talk, as a discussion point, I want to hear how other people are using hexagons, because there's a variety of ways to add hexagons to your square dance programs. So I've talked a lot about how to use them, but how do they actually work? I want to teach you to dance hexagons. And the good news is there's a detailed web page on this from 2002 that's still there. And I'm going to use pieces of that. And if you want to find that, there's a web address. I'm sure Dan will include it in the video that he posts on YouTube. And you can also just Google Clark Baker hexagon, and you'll find several good, interesting references there. So first off, I picked a person. As I remember, it's Helen, correct, Helen?
Yes, that's right.
So Helen's going to learn to dance hexagons. The worst way to do hexagons is with a Zoom talk like I'm doing now, I'm afraid, but we'll see how I do. This is my first try at that. And everyone else's job is at some point in this talk, I'm about to go to the Justin Lagakis animation page. When I'm about to do that, stop me and make sure I first talk about a Chinese fan. There's a Chinese fan, okay? So that's everyone else's job.
Okay.
And and then we will go to my final thoughts. So at this point, I'm going to change to a different window, and we'll go to Firefox, and we'll go to, if I'm squinting, I'm facing a window that has a lot of bright sun coming in my face with the curtain closed. So it has diffused lighting, but it's still blinding. Okay, is this big enough for Scott?
Yeah and no. I mean, I can still pick out things, but I really can't read it, if that makes
I don't
any
need you to
sense.
read it. Let me just see what I can do here. Hold on. If I do this, there we go. Okay,
Okay.
this is good for me. I want you to mostly see the pictures that I have, not so much the text.
Gotcha.
I know the text. I don't want you to read the text. I'm not going to read the text. This is just going to give me the flow
Okay.
of my, this is that web page I talked about.
Right.
So if I were teaching Helen hexagons, I would get us up in a hexagon, and Helen, let's assume that we are couple number one and we have our backs to the caller. And the first thing I would tell everybody is, unlike a normal square, well, like a normal square, the head couples are every other couple, but unlike a normal square, surprisingly, what's directly across from the head couples are side couples. So have all the head couples raise their hands and you'll see where they are. And the second thing that's a problem with the hexagons, unless you're dancing in a specific school, the Tarkey school, it's no longer with us in Massachusetts, is that most of the couples can't line up on the walls of the room. And many dancers have been taught or intuitively dance as wall dancers, meaning that you're always lined up on walls of the room. So that's
Right.
another thing that's slightly awkward. But we're couple one and we're lined up on walls of the room. So make sure everyone knows we don't care about couple numbers. We just care about heads and sides. And the heads have to know where their head positions are, so that if we ever get messed up and we promenade different distances, every head couple is going to promenade to one of the head positions. So each head couple has to know where all three head positions are. Same thing for the side couples. And the first call I'm going to do is heads go forward and back. And that's like the dumbest call in square dancing. Like, how hard can that be? But here's where it's worth making an important point. When Helen goes forward and back, we don't just walk into the middle and temporarily have a circle of 6 of us and walk back. When you go forward and back in a square, Helen knows that she's looking at the person who walked forward to face her, who normally in a normal square is coming from across the square. This time, Helen has to make eye contact with this dancer over here that I'm highlighting with my mouse. Does that make sense, Helen?
Yes, that makes sense.
So you're going to go forward and turn your body slightly to make eye contact with that and go back. Because frankly, if I ask the heads to do-sa-do, which I normally don't do, this Helen's going to go in and dance and do-sa-do with this gentleman and then come back out to be with me. Okay? The next thing I would typically ask them to do is ask the heads to go forward again and square through 4. Now, Helen's going to pull by with this gentleman, and you're basically going to do a wrong way grand in the middle of the square for 4 hands. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good. And it doesn't matter if the dancers are precise or sloppy. Once they do that, they're going to end up here. And Helen would have gone 1, 2, 3, 4, and she'll be this dancer here.
H for Helen.
H for Helen, right. And the sides haven't moved. And the fact that the sides haven't moved give the heads, even if they're a little imprecise, an ending target of where they are. And at this point, as the caller teaching this, and frankly, if you're a caller who's never done this, but has read pieces of this paper, you should feel confident enough to get up in a hexagon, be part of it, and actually teach and call it at the same time as you're learning. They can be learning it. It's not that scary, and they'll think it's cool dancing with their caller, and they'll appreciate watching you be in a learning mode at the same time they're in a learning mode. So I highly recommend that. At the end, I'm going to talk about a way to do it with 3 couples. We can do 2 couple dancing with 3 couples. And while it's not as much fun, it is just as educational. So here we are, and we can do calls, and I recommend doing calls like do-si-do to a wave, right and left through, and so forth. Bottom line is anything that you normally would do that's a 4-dancer call or smaller, you can do in this group of 4 that Helen's in. And there's 2 other groups of 4 around the square. So a lot of normal square dancing is working in your group of 4, be it a wave or a box or a diamond. And that works just fine in hexagons, but we have 3-fold symmetry. Make sense? Helen, happy?
I'm happy still, yes. A little bit
Good.
nervous, but happy.
Yes. So at some point, we get ourselves into ocean waves. And here's a picture of ocean waves. Now, these are ocean waves with boys on the ends, and we could do all sorts of normal 4-dancer calls there. But at some point, the interesting thing in hexagon is the 8-dancer calls. So we have to work our way up to them. And I want to point out that when we are in a ocean waves, sometimes I'll be known to ask, like, you notice how one wave is perfectly lined up on a wall and the other 2 aren't. And that can be kind of an important thing, that we aren't just kind of sloppy and we aren't in a giant Alamo ring. We really want to know that we have an ocean wave there. We want to make sure that these boys around the corner don't suddenly hold hands because they aren't in an ocean wave. In fact, let's talk about ends or boys circulate. Helen's going to answer for me. This top boy at the very top of the square looking out, where does he go on a circulate?
It goes to the end of his ocean
Yeah,
wave.
right, exactly. And then let's say he's done that. Where does this boy go on a circulate, Helen?
He goes back to where he was in the beginning.
No.
No, okay.
Well, and by back to where he was, you mean if he did circulate, he'd be right back where he started?
Yeah.
Right. No, good. So let's have him. Here he is. He's the top guy looking out. I have my cursor on him. My cursor is not huge. And he circulates, and now he's an end of a wave looking in. Do you see this next position right slightly around the corner from him?
Yeah.
Down on my right here? That's going to be his next circulate position.
But did you say ends circulate or did you say
ends circulate? Yes.
Either ends or boys. It's the same thing in this
Circulate,
case.
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Up over here. Is that okay for Helen?
I would have liked you to say instead boys circulate.
Okay,
not-
boys circulate. Yep. So I do boys circulate once and then boys circulate again.
Yeah.
And it would take 6 boys circulates and they would get all back to where they started.
Yeah.
And that's a good first thing for to try in your hexagon to make sure the dancers are orienting themselves to what's going on. And then the next thing after that we would work up to is have the boys stay where they are and have the girls circulate. So Helen, let's assume you're the girl looking out at the top of the page where my cursor is. If I do a girl circulate, where do you go?
I go 1 step to the left and I'm looking in.
Good. And if I do another girl circulate, where do you go?
I'll be looking down to the southwest somewhere there.
Yes, exactly. And I would have the girls circulate 6 times and make sure they're good. And these are the circulate paths that we talk about in ocean waves. And you can do a variety of boys circulate, girls trade, girls circulate, and then you finally get to what I would call all 8 circulate. And at this point, you have a decision to make. If you're dancing a hexagon in the back of the hall, you know that the terminology you're going to hear is all 8 circulate. And so that's what you should learn to respond to. But if you're teaching and calling to just one hexagon that maybe you're dancing in, or you're teaching to a whole hexagon session, you could change your terminology and call this all 12 circulate, just to remind people that there are 12 of them. I don't care which you do, but in any event, you need to work up to where everyone can circulate. Sound good?
Yep.
Okay. I want to show you some more things. And at this point, I want to go here. I think I want to go one more place. Hold on. Yes, now I'm going to go here. Okay. So I want to show you some more calls. But first, I asked everyone to remind me something before I go on to the Justin Lagakis. What was that?
The fan.
The fan, thank you. Okay. I wish I had an animated diagram of this, and I will in just a moment, but it won't be exactly what I'm talking about. Let's imagine, let me back up, wrong, Clark, hold on. Let me go back to here. This fan,
Clark,
let's
Clark,
pretend
doesn't
this
Taminations
fan,
do this? Oh.
say again?
Clark, doesn't Taminations do some hex dancing? Does it do the same kind of hex?
Taminations has stuff, and I will be showing you that. And
Okay.
Justin Lagakis has stuff, and I will be showing you that. But first, I want to get this mental picture in your head. Let's pretend I had this fan, and I opened it exactly to 180 degrees. And let's say I had 2 of them, and I flopped one 180 degrees down, so it drew a perfect circle. Is that going okay for you, Helen?
Yes, yes.
And then I laid my square on top of this. So on the top fan, we would have the top side couple and the top head couple, and we'd have on the left a dancer from the side couple, on the right a dancer from the side couple. And on the bottom fan, we would also have it. And actually, I'd prefer that we turn the fans 45 degrees so we don't have to split the poor couples. And they could square dance on these fans and everybody would be happy. And frankly, if they had magic markers that they were dragging on the floor, they would leave doodles on the floor, as Dorothy Shaw called them. And they would leave perhaps pretty patterns, especially if they danced grand square. Does that make sense for Helen?
Yes, I think so.
Good. So, hexagon dancing, all we do is take what we just did there with those 2 fans that were open 180 degrees, and we close them up slightly, each one to 2/3 the amount that they were open. And we have a new fan with 2 more couples, and we slip that in. And now our big circle has 3 fans, each open to 2/3 the amount, each with dancers on them, all still dancing and following the same doodles they had left on the floor. That's what's happening with hexagon dancing. I'm going to show you that in several different ways. First way is, I think, this one. Yes. Okay. So this is a dancer from Tech Squares who's now out in California named Justin Lagakis. And when I did hexagons, he was into graphics. So he did some graphics. And here's the first one I want to show you. Let's look at, oh, you want these bigger. Let's see if I can do this for Scott. Hold on for a sec. Okay, this is the best I can do.
That's
on
right.
the top left is a square, and to the right of it is the hexagon. And if
Yep.
I move my mouse on it, it does that animation to show you opening the fan.
Gotcha.
So that's a square, and that's the corresponding hexagon.
Okay.
Now we have parallel ocean waves. There's ocean waves, and there's the corresponding hexagon. Now, this ocean wave over here on my far right does not look like that picture I drew of the ocean wave. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, because when I drew ocean waves, I drew straight line ocean waves, and he has kind of bent ocean waves. And another, go ahead. Another thing I want to say is look at your box of 4 in these parallel ocean waves and the box of 4 in the corresponding hexagon. He has a slightly distorted box of 4 and a very distorted ocean wave. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Let me show you some other pictures. What's a quarter tag look like? So a quarter tag we think of as having an ocean wave across the middle. Here we don't quite have an ocean wave. We have like a Y, or we have a triple ocean wave of some sort. And then we have the 3 couples on the outside. If we look at diamonds, scrolling over, there's diamonds, and there's the corresponding diamonds. And diamonds are a little hard when you teach them to dancers, because you have these free electrons hanging out, not knowing who to hang on to. And sure enough, in a hexagon, it's even harder to see it because there's more places to look, etc. What about columns? Here's a column of 4 dancer, or 4 or 8 dancers, however we number it. And here's the corresponding columns here. Each dancer moves up to, if we were doing column circulates, Helen, who's the bottom dancer here, moves forward. She's following a back, going slightly around the corner. When she hits the lead part of the column looking out, she flops over and goes and goes and goes. And generally columns circulate when you first expose them to columns. They will do just fine. That's pretty easy to see.
Yep.
Blocks are nearly impossible to see.
Yes.
They're just dancers scattered around the square with very odd positionings. This is nearly impossible, but we have done it. And an interesting thing, if we look at these blocks, how many dancers are in your block? If you do a block circulate 4 times, you're back where you are. There's 4 people in each block. And maybe at the end, we can talk about over here, if you do in your block circulate, it takes 12 circulates before you get back to your position. And the blocks are not distinct. They are all blended together. Does Helen have any questions on what I've just shown for a second? Or I'm going to move on.
I don't know what level you use blocks, but I don't dance blocks.
Exactly. And now you know why you don't.
Okay.
Block, yeah. Okay. But
Hey, Clark, can I
ocean
make a
waves and boxes are going to be.
Clark, can I say something?
Go.
Well, when I danced this with Andy Alameo down in San Diego, he first thing he told us is he could put a cone in the center of the square or the hex, and that was no man's land. And that was a pretty good representation that you never go across the middle in this thing. So I thought that was interesting.
That's a good thing. And I would categorize that under teaching hints. And we should remember to mention more teaching hints if we hit them at the end that others have encountered, or dancing hints. The cone thing is true in square dancing, and it's also true in hexagons. Okay, so let's see what I have next. Yes. Is that where I want to go next? No, I want to stay back here, and I want to do a back. Okay. I want to show you some calls in square dancing and in hexagons. And over here on the left, we have split circulate. And here in split circulate, there they just did it. Usually when you watch these animations, you want to focus on one dancer. Let's say we're Helen. There she is moving out and going around the corner. And here I am, I walk straight across. When we do the same thing in hexagon, we just stay in our own little box. Here we go again. Helen, happy with that?
I'm perfectly happy with that, yes.
Here we're going to do our all 8 circulate. Timing wise, notice how long the man on the end looking out takes to do his circulate. Circulate really has a timing problem, but it's not so bad that it matters. Here we go with a hexagon. Notice how it kind of turns into an unrecognizable mush, but then it resolves into what you can see is 3 separate boxes of 4, or perhaps 3 ocean waves. This is the same experience your dancers are going to have, like where am I, or who am I holding on to? It's important that the girls know to hold on in an ocean wave and know which boy they're hanging on to. Obviously, swing through helps gel that. And let's look at swing through. Here's swing through here. Do that again. And here's swing through in the hexagon. Grand swing through is really easy. This is a great one to show. I mean, we've seen it here. I'll just do that once. The only dancers who get to experience something interesting is the ones in the very center. Helen, you're going to be, imagine that you're the topmost girl in red on my picture, and watch how far you go in the middle. I'm going to do that again. When you have to, you trade half by the right and then you trade half by the left. Watch how far your half by the left is with those 3 girls in the middle. How would you describe that?
It's a third by the.
Yeah, it's a little less. So one of my dancing hints is whenever you're working around the center point, that place where if we put a cone, no one would ever step on it. You always underachieve. You go less than you normally would. Hey, look at that. I picked up the square. I didn't mean to do that. Okay. Double pass through or double plow through. Here we go normally. It's not quite as mechanical as Justin drew it with the breathing. The hexagon, the center dancers always have to know when you have center 4 in a square, like if I start and say side star through, the center 4 are in facing couples. They need to know who's beside them and who they're facing. For double pass through, it's most important who they're facing. And here you see who each dancer is facing. And I think of this as a giant Y, and each of the dancers on double pass through are going to go down an arm of the Y. Here they go. See that again? Helen, happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy with that.
And the dancers normally get that pretty easily. Track 2. Do you do track 2, Helen?
Yes, I do track 2.
Track 2 is a combination of that first action, which is just in your group of 4, and a double pass, and starting a double pass through and stopping when everyone ends in their own personal ocean wave. So if we teach it that way, we often can get a hex through that pretty error-free right off the bat. It's the walking down until everyone lines up with somebody and then look for your ocean waves. And it'll take a little bit of looking to do that. I noticed that, and obviously dancing all this stuff initially with the usual, you know, dancers in their normal gender roles, it really is helpful. So don't do all position dancing. Really let the dancers rely on the stuff they know, you know, boy on the left, girl on the right, you know, head star through, double pass through, track 2, that kind of thing. Tag the line is kind of a tough call because we know that choreographically tag the line does weird stuff to us. So here's tag the line. This was a tag the line started from an unusual line of 4, boy, boy, girl, girl, looking out, but it ended in what we think of as a 0 arrangement with normal couples. And here it is on a hexagon. You got to know where your line is. I'm going to talk about this a little more. And there we go there. And finally, bend the line. Here, Justin's given us 2 face lines. And there's bend the line. And let's see it here. And again, the line is kind of a bent line, but the box is kind of a crooked facing couple box. He says some more interesting calls. I don't know that we want to go into these. Let's see what he has. Oh, I do want to talk about this. So Helen, you're number 3 in the column looking north. We're going to do scoot back here. That was good. And in the hexagon, same thing. It's a box of 4 call, no big deal. Helen's happy?
Yes, as long as I just think about a box of 4, then that works for me.
Right. And doing lots of box of 4 calls with your dancers, those let you have them dancing while you're teaching hexagon. You can do it with the music playing and give them confidence that it really isn't that difference. There's just 3 groups of boxes of 4 rather than 2. And the feeling of not lined up on the walls is also a little unsettling, but generally they're going to dance and be happy. It's when you get to triple scoot. Helen, you're number 3 in the column facing north. There's the triple scoot for that. You see what happens to you. You end up leaving your box and returning to your box. Now let's say you're the lady in red, you know, the number 3 in the column facing north, closest to us. Watch what happens to you. That underachieving sent you off to a different box.
Yeah.
That's unusual. And there's an example where scoot back and triple scoot that callers normally think of, who cares, they're the same thing. Look what happened. I also want to cover this one sometime, and now's as good a time as any. Let's talk about lead to the right. Justin's drawn it a little awkwardly here. There's heads lead right. And in the hexagon, heads lead right. No big deal. Helen, do you know the call wheel through?
Yes.
Good. Heads wheel through. And we think of lead right and wheel through is kind of the same call. Even more similar than the scoot back versus triple scoot, because wheel through is a 4-dancer call. So how could it be any different in hexagon? And we're going to watch man number 1 at the bottom of the screen. That's me. Watch where I go on where do I go on a lead right? I go right off to the couple on my right. Watch dancer number 1, me, on a heads wheel through.
Okay.
I'm going to do it again. I essentially walk straight across the square. And we probably need to talk about that a little bit, but not right now. And I don't want to cover that on Justin.
Clark?
So we're done with Justin's page.
Clark,
And let's move on. Go ahead.
I'm just curious from what you were, where I was following you 95%.
Good.
The difference between lead right and wheel through.
Yes.
Is there a general rule that if somebody is staying on the same side of, you're calling it a cone, we used to call it a flagpole center.
The flagpole center, right?
If you stay on the same side of the flagpole center, you work in a more obvious way with your own group. But if you're going around that flagpole center, like on a wheel through, that sends you off to a different group. Is there a generalization we can make there?
Maybe. Let's talk about that more in the discussion part.
Okay.
But remember to bring that back up. It's going to relate. We can talk about 2-couple dancing. And I definitely have a comment I'm going to make about what I haven't said what hexagon dancing is. I've kind of skirted the edges around it without giving you, why don't you just tell me the one general rule you said there is? And I don't want to tell you that because it kind of is complicated and off-putting, but the answer to your question is going to be related to that. And I'm almost done with the talk. I want to use terminations to show you some stuff. Let's talk about sides face grand square. There we go. One of our prettiest, most beautiful figures. And also one that can be danced with the music and is very satisfying to dancers when they learn it. Even when I do a one-night stand, depending on what I'm doing, I often end up teaching and showing this. It's only worth teaching and showing to beginners if you have a quick, reliable teach for it, though. If you have to belabor it for 10 minutes and then give them 1 minute of dancing it, it's not really worth it. Let's watch that with the path that the dancers are dancing. So when I teach Grand Square, one of the mental pictures I give people is if we had a card table and laid a card table down, and we had 4 card tables and laid 4 card tables down to about equal the size of the square, then each of the dancers are walking along an edge of the card table. And this little thing here that shows the doodles, the paths they walk, shows the card tables. I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to go to Hexagon. And here's our grand square. Sides face, grand square. It's a very kaleidoscopic, pretty figure. Reverse. And these are the paths they're actually walking. They're kind of squished squares, turning them into diamonds. Not perfect diamonds, but odd-shaped diamonds. Brad's gone to a lot of effort to exactly draw these. You notice they have slight curved lines on them and everything. Again, I haven't talked about that yet, but I will maybe in a second. Helen, have any questions on Grand Square? Usually the dancers can get this and they enjoy dancing it.
Oh, I think I'm with you.
Okay, good. I'm going to go back to the talk and go to my last page because I want to finish up and give us a lot of time to talk. Okay, so here's my final thoughts. Oh, actually, I do want to go back to one thing. Sorry. It would be this page. What I want to talk about is, up here, these are what we think of as lines back to back or couples back to back. And you can dance them on the floor like this, where they are perfect couples back to back, but the lines back to back are crooked. Or you can dance them like this, where the lines back to back are perfect and the couples back to back are distorted.
Yep.
And all those pictures you saw me doing with the computer drawn diagrams that are perfection are actually kind of a halfway in between version, and experienced hexagon dancers may dance them more like that. But when I'm first teaching and walking dancers through, like if I put dancers in either this formation or this formation, which we know are identical, and ask them what they think they're in, their answer is going to depend on how they got there. If I just had lines facing and said go forward and back, pass through, they might think more like this because they're ready for a chase right. But if I did a tag the line face out, they're going to think more like this and then bend the line. Then they're going to think, then they're going to be these guys. And it depends on what the previous call was and how they got there. But realize that the top picture and the bottom picture are really identical. Is Helen happy with that?
I somewhere there where you said bend the line.
Yes.
If I was in the position at the bottom of the page there.
Yes.
And I did the bend the line.
Yes.
I would get a Y, but would it look like that?
I think you would get the top one with everyone turned around. In other words, I think you would, if you did bend the line, these couples would be directly facing these couples. So you would have perfect facing couples, but crooked lines facing.
So almost the vertically flipped of the upper one with everybody facing in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking. It would be,
Yes.
it wouldn't be a Y, it would be a upside down.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
Good.
okay. Yeah.
Okay. So having said that, I'm done going through this is the talk that you can download online that talks about whys and all this stuff and has lots of calling examples. And this tells you the whole teaching sequence that you should go through, etc. So this talk is an introduction, but the web page is where you need to go if you want to pursue this. And the web page gives you a good teaching progression of how you should do this when you're working with your one hexagon. Okay, here's my final thoughts. And then we'll end the talk and we can have a more open discussion, and Helen's off the hot seat. So first off, it took me and others quite a while to convince ourselves that all the calls work, because we'd keep going, oh no, but how do you do this? Oh, I guess that means that. And if you prod me later, I can tell you the story of some of this, because these are not dumb people. I mean, these are MIT undergrads and grads, you know, experiencing it for the first time, having never had this idea before. And then they know square dancing well, but they know hexagons not at all. And no one came upon the second observation here, that what matters is not at all the call's definition. So this is crazy talk now. You know me, I live and breathe definitions. And yet hexagons have nothing to do with the call's definition. It's entirely having to do with the call's traffic pattern. If you show me a call's traffic pattern, it's doodle. I can show you what that doodle looks like in a hexagon. And then if you ask me, how do I dance this call in a hexagon? It's follow the doodle. but that transformation from a square grid to a hexagon grid is a mathematical transformation that probably has sines and thetas and weird stuff in it. And that's not something you can teach, but you can grasp it intuitively. This opens up a whole new world of kinesthetic dance experience. You can suddenly take someone who spent 9 months learning mainstream and slowly working their way up and internalizing all this stuff. And without teaching any new calls, you can give them a completely different dance experience that has all sorts of aha moments to it as they learn and experience each call. And it makes calls that are simple and dumb, like do-si-do, suddenly requires some thinking, and heads past the ocean suddenly becomes a hard call. And yet other calls like track 2 that you think of as complicated, or relay the deucey, aren't all that hard, but give you a huge sense of accomplishment in a hexagon.
Right.
Calls like grand square, now you don't want to do all the cheats and the dumb stuff. You really want to march and dance it with the music and see the pretty kaleidoscopic patterns being formed. Certain calls require new teaching hints. For example, Ferris wheel in a hexagon is very difficult for the in-facing couples. The out-facing couples just do their normal thing. From their point of view, it's a 4-dancer call, like wheel and deal. But the in-facing couples have to kind of underachieve, and they're confused in the middle about how to do it. And my teaching hint is underachieve and make sure your butts line up with a couple behind you. Or the center dancers
Exactly.
orient themselves behind with the dancers behind them. Some calls, easy calls, become hard. For example, heads past the ocean. And my paper has a bunch of teaching hints and examples. And as a caller, when you're teaching hexagons, you have to learn where these are. Motion around the flagpole center is 2/3 normal, underachieve, we mentioned that. Teaching and showing calls in a hexagon has improved my normal square dance teaching. I now know hints that work that were necessary for hexagons, but also are good hints for squares doing it. It helps teach dancers square awareness. Where's my wave? Where's my box of 4? Who's my partner? Am I facing in or out, etc.? And a question that I don't know the answer to that I think we should discuss is this appropriate for weaker dancers or weaker squares or newer dancers? And I do know that when you get lost, you get very, very lost.
Yes.
And that's the end of the talk. I want to conclude by saying that I've received more joy and had more fun dancing and exposing people to hexagons and watching them experience the multiple wows and gee whizzes or this is awesomes than anything else I've done in square dancing in the past 20 years. And I hope I've left you with an understanding of what hexagons are and how you can dance, teach, and call them. And at that point, I will stop. And I have a page that I didn't touch on, and I'll just leave this sitting up here for a moment. Get some of these in your head. We probably want to go, I want to go turn my screen off so we can go back and see and watch everybody. And we also had Don's, how do we phrase your question, Don? How do we
Going around the flagpole center or
understand, how do we understand lead, right versus wheel through and right? Okay, so at this point, I'm going to stop sharing because people have memorized the questions they want to discuss or talk about. I think a first one we should start on is what, I mean, this, I tell about how I use hexagons, but what are the other people doing? For example, someone mentioned Andy Alamo, and he has a bunch of videos. And also Bill Eiler has been doing them for longer than me, but he does a different style of them. So I'll shut up for a minute and see what we have for comments and discussion.
I'm going to do this a little bit differently since the hour will be up in 2 minutes, and I'm going to officially end the presentation part.
Mark?
And then everybody will want to hang around for questions, of course. But at this point, I want to do the usual thanks of Dan for the
Zoom session.
Zoom session hosting. I want to thank somebody, but I don't remember who, or several people, hoping they
Helen, yourself.
Helen, certainly.
Requesting something on hexes for several weeks and several sessions before. Clark for presenting this in a very, as you said at the beginning, you've never done it via Zoom without real dancers and making it very hard. And I think you did a really good job of getting a lot of people to understand that. Yeah, let's follow Wendy's lead and give Clark a hand on this.
Yep.
I want to thank all of you for coming as usual. And also what I usually say is if you feel you have to go because you've only set an hour aside for this, feel free to leave without feeling guilty. But let's open it for questions. And I'm going to lead off with a slightly off subject question. I got a bunch of that are slightly off, but I'll save them. But how do you get Taminations to do hexes?
Well, you saw me push a button over on the right. There's a couple of buttons about hexes, and you can just click the hexagon button and it will suddenly turn the square to a hexagon. I don't believe that the sequence, the thing that lets you call to it and type call after call after call, I believe that doesn't do hexagons, but the show me the dancers dancing an individual figure does.
I got you. Okay, because I've only been doing things in the sequencer and all I see is 2 couple lines and squares. Okay.
Right.
A side note for you, Don, that Vic Cedars CSDS does do hexagons.
Yes,
but
it does.
Animate, just like all the
Yeah.
rest of his choreography.
Cool.
Yeah, you can write the choreography with it, but you can't, yeah, it won't automate things like that.
A quick comment to you, Scott.
Yes.
You can't see too well. We can't see you too well. You've got your camera aimed at your forehead. Not that that's important to us, but I just
That's
thought.
all right. I'll adjust.
Now, have we got any questions about hexagons or Clark's presentation or any of Clark's comments that?
Could I ask the same question that you asked, Don? Because I had a quick look at the definition for wheel through, and as Clark said, it doesn't follow the definition. How should I have thought to do the man's part correctly?
Well,
I haven't grown my beard long enough.
so
I look at Clark. I need to grow it out.
The first thing is, talk about, since wheel through is a two-couple call, let's talk about two-couple dancing. Everything we've talked about, sometimes in square dancing, you don't have a square, you only have two couples. And plenty of callers have written and called and generated even tapes of two-couple dancing material that, you know, people can get together and dance when they only have two couples. Two-couple dancing is not as much fun and there's not as much variety in it, but it's better than nothing. And it's maybe had a little more emphasis with the Zoom calling dances where it's hard to have two people at home dance 8-couple material. I mean, doing
Right.
Relay the Deuces is hard. Two-couple dancing, you can add a third couple in, and that's the hexagon version of two-couple dancing with 3 couples, which I sometimes call tripod dancing. So sometimes when I have a small group and I want to expose them to this, you know, usually just 3 couples, maybe with me being part of that, I will get them together and we will start working on two-couple calls like ladies chain. And that's where they learn that the ladies only go, they don't go halfway across, they go a third of the way across. So
Right.
head ladies chain over and head ladies chain back and so forth. And heads past the ocean, they begin to learn that. And then swing throughs and recycles and square throughs. And there's actually a lot of stuff to do there. It's stuff that in hexagon dancing would only be done that way by the center 4 doing that call. And we don't do a lot of center 4 stuff in normal squares because the outsides are standing around watching. Other than head square through 4 to get the sequence started or heads past the ocean to get the sequence started, we don't do a lot of two-couple dancing in the middle of the square. So tripod dancing's fun, and that's where you get to see the wheel through thing happen or not. So on the wheel through, oh, and I need to say a second thing that I kind of got slightly distracted on during the talk. With tripod dancing, there's 3, when you square up, you have 3 couples. 1 couple is lined up on a wall. And always, when you're doing things in a tripod, I always am talking about who owns the wall, which group of people is really officially lined up on a wall. And because people kind of get disoriented, and that helps in tripod dancing. So knowing who owns the wall will help you dance. When we do the heads lead right or the heads wheel through, or in tripod dancing, just wheel through, the men in the normal position normally kind of go around the center and they have to underachieve around the center. And that underachieving around the center effectively turns them walking straight across.
Yep.
So maybe that's a way of thinking about it. And Don, I think you are right. It depends upon which side of the flagpole center you're on.
Clark, I tuned out my mentally for just a second. So if you're doing tripod, you know,
Yep.
two-couple hex, and you do a wheel through, do you end up with something weird?
Yeah,
No.
well, no, you end up in couples back to back.
Yeah,
Okay, so they take a different path than they would with 4 couples there, six couples. The guy doesn't,
The
never
guy
mind.
effectively walks almost straight ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did see it. I wasn't going. John, you're anxious to tell us something.
I think it would have been neat to show us a right and left through, heads right and left through, because we wouldn't end up with our own partner, right?
That's also true. So let's
That would have
just,
been a good one to show us, that because we'd all be splitting up.
because right off the bat, the head man number 1 and lady number 1 diverge from each other and get someone else who they don't expect and courtesy turn them. That's correct. Or
So,
if you're doing tripod dancing, you can see that right off the bat. That's a great call to do in the beginning.
so if you want to resolve to your original partner because you only have a hex, you used to think of right and left through, and then right and left through is a 1/2 0, or do it twice and it zeroes out. Now you think of it as a 1/3 0. You do it 3 times and it zeroes out.
Right.
would-
And
it would-
your mantra of when in trouble, do it double doesn't always work. Right.
When in tribble, do it triple.
when in tribble.
About when in a pickle, do a triple.
Yeah, thank you.
If you're doing just 3 couples, have you got
Yes.
two head couples and 1 side couple then? How
No.
does it?
No,
Oh, I'm sorry. If I'm just doing tripod, 3 couple, all I have is 3 couples, then no one is a head or a side. They're all
Oh.
just dancers, and
Oh.
every call is directed to all of them.
Okay.
Just like when you're doing 2 couple dancing, you have 2 head couples, and 3 couple dancing would be 3 head couples or 3 side couples, or however you
Okay.
choose to do it.
I teach that as triangle dancing or half hex.
Half hex or triangle. Yeah.
Half hex is
Helen?
triangle.
I'm still working with
Go
the
for
wheel
it.
through, with
Yes.
the lead right and the wheel through.
Yes.
Am I right in thinking that when I'm doing a lead right, no, we don't go across we're on the same side of the center all the time, so we stay together.
Yes, that's true.
But if you're doing the wheel through, one of us in the lead right, it'll be the man, he'll go across the center. That's why he sort of changes, he goes across. Is that why he goes across?
I think you could think that way. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I also think of the no man's land as a black hole. You get close to the black hole, then gravity throws you to the left. It throws you like real quick to the left or to the right, depending upon what you're doing. So that's how I think of hex. I think of it as getting to that flagpole center, then gravity is throwing me away. I'm going away from the black hole. Head square through 4, normally I would step forward and kind of pair off is the way I would cheat it. But when I'm thinking of it in hex, I'm stepping forward and then gravity is throwing me out away from my partner. I'm thinking of it as a black hole, and I'm trying to I go forward and then I turn away from the center.
Okay.
That's
Mel?
how I think of it.
The question I was having, I'm still digesting this wheel through my mind.
Yep.
So if I have, for instance, my hex is the Y formation. So I've got
Yep.
the three facing couples in the Y formation, with the center couple with their backs to the center of the flagpole.
We've effectively done a heads pair off.
Okay,
Right.
so I'm in that formation. Now, if I do a flutter wheel and sweep a quarter more, my boxes are now rotated a quarter.
Yep.
Yep.
If I do a wheel through, am I working with just the
Just
couple?
that group of 4, no big deal. None of what we're saying applies.
So it would be a wheel through would have different pattern or different traffic flows from different arrangements of the actual hexagon.
Correct. When
Right.
you're doing 4 dancer calls with 3 replications of the 4 dancers around the outside of the square, like what you were just doing, all the 4 dancer calls have the same flow, traffic pattern, no big deal. Everyone can do it. Nothing's changed. It's when you do a 4 dancer call in the center with 6 dancers that you're going to have this effect that we're discussing.
So it's that flip flop back and forth that the caller and the dancers have to keep straight. Is basically
Right. And obviously
linear
every
alignment.
8 dancer call has the effects.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking that is what I've watched on the videos, you know, where you have the Y, in most cases, the dancing I see, they end up in the triangle.
Yep.
I thought that was primarily for things like just the physical kinesiology of an ocean wave having hand
Yeah, when you
contact
have
will make
ocean
that.
waves, it looks like 3 straight waves, right?
Yeah, I thought that might be the reason for that, but no, it's just so you have to switch 2 couple, 6 couple, 2 couple, or sorry, 2 couple, 3 couple, 2 couple, 3 couple. Okay.
Hey, Clark, I got a question. Back to my right and left through. If you called right and left through once, then you called right and left through again, everybody's back to their own spot, right?
Nope.
Nope.
If let's just say,
mean,
let's
heads.
imagine just 3 couples. We're all head couples. We're just
Oh,
doing the
okay.
triangle
All right.
dancing. It would
Yeah,
take 3 of them to get you back home.
All right, I see what I did wrong. Thank
Yep.
you.
Keith, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Thank
I
you.
think of that rule in Hex. Usually, in order to resolve it, you've got to call it 3 times in order to get them to a position you can call an Alaman left from. So when I'm trying to resolve Hex, I have to call it 3 times in order to get back to where I want to find a position I can do an Alaman left from.
Okay.
Let's hear from
Keith?
the other Keith now.
The other part of the West Coast. Well, I guess John Jurgens is on the West Coast too. Here's an observation and then followed by a question. The observation is when I do a wheel through, if we say heads wheel through, if I'm the number 1 man or the number 3 man, I walk past 1 side couple and 1 head couple and end up at the next side couple. If I'm a woman, I just go face my corner. Or the bell, whatever.
Yep.
You say. So I think that holds true in Hex too, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Right.
So
and that brings up you still haven't asked your question, but let me interject here.
go ahead.
When you get a square up in the back of the hall, you dance while the caller's calling the squares up front mainstream. They're going to do a patter tip. What happens after the patter tip?
Singing call.
Singing
They're
call.
going to do a singing call. Singing calls for hexes often are where we break down. Let's just start with the first simplest thing. 4 ladies promenade, go inside, get back home, swing your man.
Mm-hmm.
You don't swing your man. The 4 ladies have to underachieve promenading, and it's very confusing who they swing. So Hex sometimes turns really trivial calls into puzzles that make you think a bit, but it all fits the general pattern and rules. So, okay. Keith, now you have your question.
Beyond thinking, I think that you will find, and I'm going to ask you, do you find that when you do such calls as relay the Ducey and spin chain and exchange the gears, that they really have to go through it first? It's going to be really hard for someone to think their way through that. They have to see it before, in other words.
Well, so let's talk chain and exchange the gears for a second. We're in waves. Boy, right hand waves, boy, girl, boy, right? You have to turn half. That has nothing to do with Hexagon. They just do it. It's in their group of 4. Centers go 3/4. Still nothing to do with Hexagon. We're good. Then what happens? The center 2 have to trade, correct? While the others turn around.
Yeah, well, they're not
The
going to.
center's trade is going to be 3 of them, and they move 1 dancer position forward. So that's another thing. If you think of it in dancer positions, trading in the middle is moving to the next dancer position. Turning a 3-person thing is, again, taking 1 step to the next dancer position. At this point, they have their back to their little 4 dancer stars. That's the usual star they have. That star turns 3 spots. the usual person who leads out raises your hand, and you have to follow the mama duck to wherever they go. This is the one point where, other than the trade in the middle so far, nothing's been unusual for the dancers. Follow the mama duck is still just a group of 4 following this one person, or 3 followers and 1 leader. And as long as they don't try to walk through the middle of the square and they take a slightly wider loop around the outside, and that's what I tell them is, you know, make sure you walk around the outside of that mess, whatever it is. I don't describe it as anything but a mess. Don't get in anybody's way. Don't walk over anybody. And then they unwrap and turn into that wave the same way they always do. It's the same group of 4. So turning into the wave is another isolated group of 4 move that they already know how to dance by feel. And then bang, they have their 3 waves. So that's where relay,
the chain and
the gears is not a hard call.
Mm-mm.
The chain and the exchange the diamonds, they got to kind of think their way through, is what you're saying. A little
Yeah,
bit.
3 stars is what it is.
Yeah,
You
well,
have 3
okay.
stars in a spin chain exchange the gears.
Well,
One's going around one, the other one's going around another. So you've got 3 stars that are moving.
oh, okay. Well, I think some people think of it as a 3/4 exchange the diamonds and flip them.
Yeah, or a 3/4 exchange the diamond, right.
But yeah, and don't confuse me with a challenge dancer, by the way. You know, I'm just familiar with a couple of concepts. So it's not too hard, but except for like several dancers, 6 to be exact, I guess. They have to think.
Yeah. So
more.
so you're hitting close to something. Let's say you wanted to teach this to a group and you had in your hands, it ends up the 8 dancer calls in Hexagon are the really interesting ones.
Oh yeah.
And the first one you're going to show them is obviously circulates, and then maybe acey-deuceys and Ferris wheel and so forth. But now you're in the ocean wave calls. Which one do you teach first? Relay the deucey, spin chain through, spin chain the gears, or spin chain and exchange the gears?
Well,
And I would
think.
I would start with spin chain through.
right, start with spin chain through, just like we do in lessons. And that has almost nobody having to do the interesting part, but they get to see that chain through the middle. And then you would work up to spin chain the gears. And then you would go to spin chain and exchange the gears. And then you would go to relay the deucey.
That's right, because you stay in 4-person groups throughout the first 3, and then relay the deucey has all these circulates that you're going to have to try to.
Right, but relay the deucey has a buddy system. And the buddy system completely applies to hexagons, it ends up. So the end of the wave and the adjacent dancer are going to track each other and go on and off the big wave with each other and end up with each other. And that holds true in Hexagon. And it's even more important there to kind of make sure you don't just grab the nearest, you know, any port in the storm when you need to grab and swing somebody if you get nervous. So, and then another big 8 dancer call is load the boat. Load the boat on the outside. How do you teach it? Normally I teach it as you pass 3 people and face in.
Yep.
Still walk around the outside, pass 3 people and face in. So the ends part of load the boat is easy. But this is where I've learned to teach load the boat better in hexagons, and it helps with your current teach, is in load the boat in the middle, the person you're facing, I say you're going to work with 3 times. You're going to pass through with them. You're going to face out so they become your partner. You're going to trade with them. And then you're going to find a new victim. You're going to search desperately for a new victim to pass through with. And until the 2 of you point at each other and see who you are, you don't know what to do. And it ends up load the boat is not a hard call either with that little bit of instruction.
So frame of reference, but the original question was, you really have to take people through this versus putting 12 people in the back of a room when you're calling normal squares and expecting them to work it out. They have to do it before.
Yes. So yes, and I usually walk people through all this stuff. If I have to take a hex, let's say I'm at a convention like the National Convention, and I want to get a hex up in the back and dance. Either I take a hex with 9 experienced or 10 experienced people and throw a couple in who I've recruited and warn them, this is going to be a little weird. We might break down some, just bear with me. You'll begin to pick it up, and let them absorb it by osmosis. Or take 12 dancers off on the side. I show and teach them a bunch of stuff for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we go in the back and try our best to do it.
Clark, I've got a question for you.
You know,
In the natural progression, I'm just going through the levels. I only go up to A1, so I'm just
Yep.
going through the levels in my mind, and I'm thinking about natural progression and teaching order. Now, fundamentally speaking, most of the hexes that I've seen are usually dancers at dance plus advanced challenge. They go into that, but nominally hexagon squares will fundamentally work for any level.
basic and mainstream, correct?
As you progress through, I can see that if you learn basic and mainstream, the concept of spin chain the gears, spin chain and exchange the gears, the rest of them is very, very simple because that foundation is already there with the basic and the mainstream level calls.
Correct.
When I was just, while we were talking, I was just having a look at a couple of videos and walkthroughs and demonstrations they were doing with hexes, and it was all walkthrough. This is what you do. It was either a challenge call, or it was an advanced call, or it was a plus call. The dancers in the basic and mainstream, they got a walkthrough and they didn't really seem to have any problems. It was there and then they were dancing it. Do you find that natural progression the same as you would with normal squares?
I don't know if I know how to answer that. Does Scott have any insight into that?
I have no idea what he's asking.
Okay. For instance, if I was going to teach spin chain through, that
Yep.
center's trade is a third.
Yep.
Okay, so that's not a problem. Dancers will pick that very, very easy, as opposed to a trade
Yes.
with the normal square. Once they have that foundation of moving a third in basic and mainstream, the natural progression for spin chain and exchange the gears after a spin chain through becomes blatantly obvious, because your rotation on the start is only 1/3. You're used to doing that 1/3.
Sure.
If it's introduced at the higher levels, it's
think-
walkthrough after walkthrough after walkthrough to gain that concept.
I think by the time you
No?
get the underachieve, when you're moving around the center, you underachieve, including, the ladies promenade, the head ladies chain, Ferris wheel has an
Ferris
underachieve
wheel.
in it. And the spin chain through has the underachieve, and that when they trade across the middle and they look for the three of them, I think that by the time they've accomplished that with several of those mainstream calls, then no big deal.
Wheel and deal is another one.
Plus calls.
Yeah.
Which one?
Yeah. Wheel and deal. That's another one
Oh.
that just all of a sudden you see it once you've done it once. It becomes apparent what you do with a wheel and deal. Like a
Yeah, but
Ferris
how
wheel.
often do you have the centers wheel and deal in normal square dancing?
Fair bit.
A lot of times.
Okay, good. Then yeah, having those
Yeah.
same people do the wheel and deal, right?
Yeah, because because I do a lot of different stuff with my mainstream and plus people, so I'll do wheel and deal from the centers. Yeah, put them in a two-face line and have them wheel and deal. Yeah.
Yep.
Now, the second part of my question, we do a pass through bend the line, and
Yep.
that's easy enough. I can understand
Yep.
that in the hex. So let's just take that foundation formation we have, where we've got the three boxes, one with their back to the
Yep.
center of the hex. So if I do a star through, now
Yep.
I've got boxes, pass through.
Yep.
Is the progression move to the next ever used?
In the line.
Usually we don't.
What I'm thinking is, if I'm thinking in this way, if I go star through, pass through, that elongation there, I'm working with another couple. I could either, with the next couple, pass the ocean, spin chain through.
Yeah, I mean, normally we don't use the phrase on to the next too often in square dancing today, but
No.
it's the same as bend the line. So, I mean, if you had lines facing and you said pass through, move on to the next, you could also say pass through, bend the line. And then with that couple you found, you could, right and left through, ladies chain, Dixie style, whatever you want.
So the fundamental principle would be the same then.
Yeah,
So
and that
I
still
could easily
works.
go star through, pass through. I'm actually facing another couple in that kind of situation, but the bend the line is just to gel that.
You really
facing
should
another
call
couple.
bend the line. It would be wrong to just say star through, pass through, right and left through. Just
Yeah.
like in normal square dancing, you wouldn't call star through, pass through, right and left through because you're looking out. You'd want to pass through, move on to the next right and left through.
Yeah, and so that bend the line would take care of that.
Yes.
But essentially that's what it achieves, is moving to the next
Yes.
couple. Okay,
Exactly.
now I've got that in my head. Thank you.
Good.
Clark, I posted up in the chat when I was down with Andy Almeo in San Diego. We did a Grand Colonel spin, and that was really kind of neat. Kind of like it's a flowery one, just like Grand Square.
That's
That
good.
worked out.
I
real
do
well.
want to comment. Chain is difficult and not rewarding. So I always, when in the singing call, we have a teacup chain in our square, either tries to do it or botches it or wants to learn it. I hate teaching teacup chain in Hexagon, and it never seems worth the teach effort, and it's not a rewarding thing to do.
No.
But Grand Square definitely is.
Yep.
Hey, Clark, just a quick question. You were talking about getting a group together in the back of the hall to,
Yeah.
a fun way to teach. That was my introduction to it. The CCC kids at a convention in Colorado years ago grabbed my husband, myself, pulled us into a hex, and that was my introduction to it.
Cool. CCC stands for?
Oh, the Kids of Callers and Cuers.
Oh, Kids of Callers and Cuers. Okay, good. Yep.
Gave themselves a name. They're now married with children, etc. So, they're no longer
thrown in cold into an existing hex.
So which one of those are
are
calling now? I know who's queuing, but who's calling of that group? I don't know.
I don't know for sure. All of them. I mean, the Dodge kids were there, but at any rate, they did that. Then when I wanted to teach it several years later to
Wendy, you're cutting in and out.
Yeah. I want to tell everybody that I learned my hex from Clark, and he did that with me and my wife. Took us out in the floor and said, "Okay, you're going to get through this. We're going to put you in a position," and then we started, and we both love it. Both my wife and I both love dancing hex. We try every chance we can to get into a hex square.
So the teacup chain discussion.
when I wanted to teach my youth club, I found Clark's paper, and that's what I used. From just his paper to what I danced there, etc. You can figure it out and teach it.
Probably.
Thanks, Wendy. Was it Dan? You wanted to say something about teacup chain?
Yes. So I noticed that you're on your list of questions is what is Bill Eiler doing? And in my video list, or in the other place that hexes show up in the videos that I've posted to YouTube, is Bill Eiler doing a singing call with teacup chain in it. So what is Bill Eiler doing?
So in my paper, which I'm not going to put up on the screen, but let me go refer to it for a second so I get the history right. And give me one sec here. Okay. You guys on this chat in the past have mentioned Gene Trimmer's book, or Will Orlick's book called Choreography Gimmicks.
Right.
And I wanted to point out that I believe, and people had questions of where can I obtain that book? And I believe that Cal Campbell has gotten permission from somebody to have that book scanned and put up on a permanent website. It may be the Internet Archive website. And we can now see a bunch of books that are pretty hard to obtain or unattainable these days. And I believe that one is one of them. So we need to find that link and maybe ask Hal Campbell for it if we can't, and get that posted, because that's a great resource. So independent of everything else. So that book, Choreography Gimmicks, has something called hexagon squares and triangle squares, with a hexagon squares has Jim Gamallo in 1968, and triangle squares has Lee Boswell, maybe 1968 listed. And Jim Gamallo's are the rectangle squares, and that's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
But I think Lee Boswell's was what we're talking about. And Bill Eiler saw that and ran with it and wrote an article. He saw something, he wrote an article in 1993 in the Mike Side Management newsletter called Apple Pie Dancing, Hexagons, a Little Slice of Square Dance Heaven. And he got that from the 1986 issue of American Square Dance magazine, which had triangle squares by Ross Crispino, with credit to Harriet Miles. So that's some background on what he does. And he does hexagons looking just like what we have, but he didn't follow the one consistent rule where if the doodle looks like this in regular squares, the doodle is transformed to what we do in hexagon squares. Instead, he changed the terminology a bit. He changed certain calls, and he's very successful at getting up and with not a lot of walkthrough, teaching and calling to squares doing hexagons of simple choreography, but it doesn't quite fit our rules. And he never cottoned on to the idea that we could dance any choreography in real time, in the back, and have it resolved the way I said at the very beginning of the talk.
Right.
That wasn't his goal. So that's the Bill Eiler stuff. And initially, when I discovered it and talked to him about it, we kind of agreed to call his stuff Western hexagons and my stuff Eastern hexagons, because he's like more West Coasty and I'm more East Coasty. But for better or worse, I think that my stuff is kind of spread like a virus, and that's what most of us are doing.
Right.
Okay.
This brings to mind that I think I have an idea for a presentation I'm going to do in 2 or 3 weeks. And it's
on hex?
No.
Oh.
On 6-couple dancing, the way I do it.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And
rectangle dancing.
Rectangle.
It's not even rectangle, but it's very closely related to rectangle. And I've given the talk a few times, and I've given it other times in relation to mental image. But it's something, the reason I think it'd be good to give is in contrast to what we're doing here, it's not more challenging. In fact, it's very non-challenging. It can be taught in 2 seconds, because you don't really have to teach anything. You just have to set it up and call. Any caller can do it who's a module caller very easily. And mental image callers can do quite a bit with it. And the advantage is that there are times that you only have 6 couples left in the square. You know, you have 1.5 squares left at the end of the evening, and you don't want to send the other square home, the other 2 couples home, and you can include them, or you throw it in as a gimmick because you happen to have 3 squares and you can split them into 2. And anyway, I won't talk about it here, but it's something for those of you that are blown away by this very interesting extended theory of how to add interesting and more complication without adding new stuff you have to learn. In contrast to that, it's a very simple thing. It's not very challenging mentally, but it is nice for variety, and just about any caller can use it. So no, being the one that schedules these talks, with no objections, I'll be using that soon. Clark, I was going to ask 2 questions, but they were just answered in the last. Tell us a little about the origins of this, and tell us how Bill Euler's differs from yours, but you just answered those, so I won't.
Right.
I'm going to give just a tip that I should probably do offline, but if you do another talk, Clark, you can make your cursor a little bigger by going into system preferences, accessibility.
Good.
Thing,
yes.
And it makes the cursor bigger.
No, that would be, I like that. Yep.
And I've found that I have a very slow upload speed. So when I'm moving the cursor around, it looks like I'm bringing attention to it, but I've been told recently that all I'm doing is making it go too quickly. And so I have to move the cursor someplace and wait, because my upload speed is pretty slow, but yours was adequate, so we could see the cursor moving nicely.
You just have to slow it down a bit, Don, because you go like this with it.
Well, yeah, and I tried it, I think you can see better if you're moving quickly, but I realized that with the slow upload speed, it has
That's because his mind is faster than the rest of us.
Mike, normally I see you come in and out. Do you have a good comment for us?
The coming in and out?
Mike Gormley.
Oh. I don't see Mike. Where's Mike?
He's down at the bottom center of my screen.
Yes, he is coming out, in, out.
I wondered if Mike wanted to say something and hadn't had a chance.
I don't know, Mike, oh, there you are. There you go.
Hump day, Mike.
You've got no audio, Mike. No pun intended.
Apparently his microphone is broken. His mic.
Oh, maybe that's it. Okay.
Clark, I had a real quick question. Is there any way to get, I don't know, hint, to get your dancers to want to do this? Because I've thrown it out there like a big old lure a lot of times when we've only got, 12 or 24 dancers, and everybody says, "Oh no, we don't want to do that."
Do they trust you?
They must not. Scotty, maybe you should come over and they'll trust you. But, I think it's they don't want to learn. They don't want to learn something new. They want to work on getting better at what they already know, and that's that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you're asking a question that's close to one I wanted to ask, which is to Don, who at the moment is the one on this call who's done it, but it doesn't really float his boat. Why doesn't it float your boat? What's wrong with you?
I guess because I get my challenge from calling and not so much from dancing anymore. I get my enjoyment in dancing doing contras. It's interesting. It's a nice extension, but I didn't need that kind of, for me, I guess it wasn't a challenge once I got the concept, and I get my thrills seeing the light bulbs go on in other people's faces in different ways, like on sessions like this. I don't know, no good reason. I just didn't do enough of it.
But yeah, I mean, I would think that but as a caller, where all these calls and you've seen them work so much, to suddenly see them all work in this new situation, it should have been unusual and intriguing enough. And also as a dancer, the kinesthetic feel and how it makes your brain work a little different. I don't do Hexagon for the challenge of it all the time. I do it because it feels like I'm cheating the system somehow, and it can turn boring dances and boring callers into interesting stuff that keeps me, entertained at a dance or a weekend.
Thanks, Clark.
I do find it fascinating. I find it extremely fascinating that you've got a different thing going and all the rules still apply that we know, and you can do other stuff with it. And I like your thought on the different kinesthetic feel. I don't know. I guess I just had too many boats to float at the same time. Maybe it's like you when I introduced you to contras. I'm not ready for it.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Right. Yeah. That's a good comeback. So for Keith, I don't know the answer to your question other than I get people to do, I get people to follow me as a leader, be it, hey, come on out in the hall after midnight at Color Lab, I'm going to show you something or whatever with my enthusiasm for whatever it is I'm doing.
Right.
And same thing when I go to IPAC or other places, I, corral or dragoon people into trying things. Same thing with hashtag, which again, Don, you should schedule a hashtag session sometime.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I understand that kind of standing up at the mic and going, we're gonna learn some hexagons now, and having everyone groan, like clearly that isn't the right thing.
Clark, for those of you that don't know, every year at Color Lab and probably other places too, Clark's always got a gathering around him because he's got some cool new gimmick going. Many of the times it's been variations on Grand Square. And it's such a popular thing now that it's regularly scheduled at some of the post-evening events. When you get to Color Lab, I won't say if you get to them, jump in. Clark keeps people thinking and entertained above and beyond, and it's a great thing.
I think that pretty much is the answer to your question to Don, Clark. One of the reasons why hexagons don't really work, the 2 exposures that I had to it and never actually participated in it because it was full, but the person doing it understood the mechanics of it, was a pretty, a fair caller, pretty average caller, but just did not have the personality or the charisma to drop something new onto it. One of the reasons why it works for you, and no, I'm not sucking up, you have a natural enthusiasm for it, and you have a natural energy and charisma that will draw people into wanting to try something with you. Whereas most callers, I say this, I just throw it out there, it doesn't matter if you're good or bad, because it is that conceptual thing, they don't have the enthusiasm or the charisma to pull it off successfully.
See, what I usually say is I say, let me show you something that Clark showed me. That gets my dancers up.
I'll be honest here. One of the differences is the age of your dancers. My club is almost all 30 and under. Average age is about 17. I have 22-year-olds or so that have been dancing plus since they were 8. So they're much younger, but they're always wanting something new without going on to A. They don't want to move on to A because they don't have time for more kind of thing. And we're always bringing new people into the club. But honestly, the younger the group, the more they want to do something unique and different.
So Wendy, have you done hashtag stuff yet or not?
I haven't. I don't know. I heard him say that. I'm going, I know nothing about this. What is this? So,
okay, so this is good. So you'll get a lot out of my hashtag session if and when Don schedules it.
Definitely.
Just remember that's coming. Yep.
It's always better to stand up high and look down on hashtag because it makes it more interesting to see if you're standing up and looking down on it.
I just wrote a note to talk to Clark about a presentation on hashtags because I don't know what they are. Hey, Clark, you've danced
right now, we're still completely locked out of dancing. We have nowhere to dance in our
correct. Yeah.
We're still stuck there. So we're going to have a Zoom dance in place of our annual anniversary dance next Friday. We're just going to get together and play games.
I'm sorry to hear that.
That's what we're going to do.
Clark, just out of curiosity's sake, you've danced, I'm pretty sure, my 6 couple facing line stuff. Any quick comments about how it's totally boring, how it's too easy to teach, how it's
no, I mean, I like the 6 couple dancing, the rectangle dancing. And when I first was exposed to it, and I mean, obviously with all this stuff, doing 2 couple calls, 4 dancer calls, that's just obvious. They all work. You just have 3 instances of it rather than 2. But the thing that's intriguing is how do you do the 8 dancer calls? And you
Right.
know, can you do load the boat? Can you do spin chain the gears? Can you do spin chain exchange the gears? Can you do relay the deucey? Can you do track 2? You know, blah blah blah. Can you do chain reaction, etc. And if you can, is there a general rule, or is there a here's how we do this call? And that's where the rectangle dancing didn't have a general rule, but had a here's what we do in this case, this case, this case. And at that point, I was like, that's okay, but it's not as elegant as if you had something that had a general rule.
Right.
So,
That's how I feel about it.
right.
I guess the facing lines rather than rectangles that I use, you can do it with 4 couples, 6 couples, 8 couples, all at the same time, no problem. The rules are all the same. You don't teach. The only thing I teach them that's different is when I say right and left grand, they go 12 hands instead
All
of
the way, yeah.
6 or however it is. Just go to get your original partner and promenade to your home position. And I call grand right and left very, very infrequently when I do it, and end up with a, you know, go hand over, hand over, hand over, because you got to keep going, and just a little humor in there. But anyway, don't want to talk about that much. We'll save it for later, another time. Any other comments, questions? Thank yous to Clark. Questions?
Yes,
about
Clark.
why?
Great job, Clark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Shall we fade away?
Adjourn this thing?
Just out of curiosity, Dan, has anybody else been having experience coming in and out, or the screens locking up?
I had a weird, the weird fade out when Wendy was talking, and Clark faded a couple of times, although not long enough to be unintelligible.
I was just wondering if Clark had a vocal pickup microphone, because every time you leaned back, your voice disappeared.
Oh, that could be. I don't know how my pickup works. I have the AirPods in my ears, but the laptop's in my lap.
Clark, I was going to mention it. It almost seems like you have it mutes things until you talk, and then it fades in. So
Exactly.
the beginning of a sentence, the first words are very quiet. We can hear them, and it's not the first words, it's probably the first half word. So
I'd say that the noise cancellation is a little bit over companded. It's squelching him at when his volume is below a certain level.
I think that's what I was trying to say, Keith, only in the correct words. Thank you.
Dan understands it.
And Dan,
No, I just had it lock up a couple times. I had to get out and come back in. So I was just wondering if it was me or my system, or if it was just something on Zoom.
Have not had that, Mel.
Yeah, Dan, when I was talking, and I literally got kicked out of the meeting and had to come back into it. So,
me too.
Yeah, so that there was some sort of a glitch happen. It happens. It could be either one of our connections, either, Mel. So
just for me talking, I just changed my laptop to using the laptop speakers in my laptop microphone. I don't know if that works different or better.
Much better, Clark.
That sounds better, Clark.
So sorry about that. Next time, tell me not to use the iPod or the earpods.
The earpods.
sounds great. Hey, thanks you guys for everything. It was a fun lesson.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, this was a really good one. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thanks again. I guess I will be leaving, and Dan will be leaving us all.
So I have not found the Will Orlick thing on archive.org yet, poking through Cal's link. If anybody finds that, send it to me. And if there are other resources that I should add to comments or things on the video, please send them along. I will try to dig up the ones that I remembered, but I don't know that I found the animations that you had, Clark.
The Justin Lagakis animations?
Yeah.
Again, I think if you Google Clark Baker Hexagons, it'll be one of the top couple of
Okay.
hits.
I found your other paper, but not that, but I'll dig a little deeper.
Clark, before we go again, I've been thinking that it would be fun to do a session on grand square variations, but I think it would be hard to do on Zoom unless you had a way to animate them. So unless you come up with some thoughts on that, I'm going to pass, but just a thought.
Yeah, I'm even worried about how I'm going to show the hashtag stuff, because without the other people like Justin and Taminations with Brad, you know, coming up with ways of showing things, like I don't have good drawing / animation software. So
the way I do my 6 couple stuff in the mental image classes is crude, but I have a magnetic board with dolls, and I just put my iPhone as a separate camera and point it at that and physically have them watch me move it with my hands.
And you have 2 calls into the Zoom call?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, actually, I don't know if I have 2 calls in or if I just have the camera thing. But again, I have to go very slowly because there's a lot of latency there. It's really pretty bad. But yeah, not a great way, but I've come up with, you've probably seen my bigger magnetic dolls. Well, I've come up with some smaller ones on a magnetic whiteboard about that big that it works reasonably well for doing that.
One thing that I haven't had is there are some videos out there of Hexagon Dancing. I found a good one that I was potentially going to show. I have not found a good Hexagon Dancing. If you Google square dance space Hexagon, you might, and then look at videos, you might find some, but I've found none that are shot from straight at the top or at a nice angle. So you can actually, you know, as a caller, watch more people and get a better view of everything. So that's something that doesn't exist yet that I'm aware.
Much to my surprise, a grand square variation I wrote years ago, Grand Tour, which was intended, I guess it was Daryl Clendenin was complaining that on singing calls, you call grand square, and then Alaman left weave the or right and left grand, and they've only got half the square to promenade, but there's a full squares of music. And he wanted a square dance, grand square type of figure that ended across the square, so it'd be a full promenade. So I eventually worked one out called Grand Tour, published it, and Tony Parks used it at a traditional dance. I never saw anybody use it at a Western dance, and especially not as a singing call. And then about a few months ago, somebody pointed out that Dick Ledger used it, and it's on YouTube.
Oh, wow.
So there's a nice demonstration of YouTube, although he goes through the whole thing twice so they come back home again, but that's all right. It does show the flow pattern of it and everything.
We are doing it in Sweden.
Grand
Tour in Sweden? Great.
Yes.
Wow.
In our club, we are doing it. We love it.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good to know.
I brought it to Austria as well.
You brought it where?
To Austria.
Is there much square dancing in Austria? I just sold a book to there, but I wasn't aware there was much in Austria.
Yes, there is. And they have a European convention coming up in 2022.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
Yeah. So I have a tie-in for you, Don.
Yeah.
How does Hexagons relate to the contra dancing you mentioned?
How does Hexagons relate to the contra dancing I mentioned? They're both outgrowths of traditional European dancing.
Colin Hume, a square and contra dance caller, I think in Cambridge, England, wrote a traditional square called the Cambridge Hexagon, having seen my webpage and wanting to do something.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the dancers found it too easy, so he made a harder version of it.
I'm just looking if anybody wants to hang around, I'm looking for the Dick Ledger.
Oh, the Dick Ledger Grand Tour?
Yeah.
I posted the link on the chat.
Thank you. I guess I don't have to look then. You're fast at that stuff. No. I'd be curious if what Hannah's doing is the identical one that I think. You can check the check what Mel posted and let me know Thursday.
Okay, I will. Wednesday.
Wednesday, right? I got the wrong group in my mind. Right. Oh yeah. Anyone else got any great off the subject topics like we ended it a few minutes ago and we're still talking? That's one of my problems, I think. Good chat.
I'm just waiting to find out when you're going to come back and talk to us, Tom.
Excuse me.
Mel, you're waiting till who comes back to where?
I'm waiting to see when you're going to come back and give us the second half of your mental imaging.
Oh, on your group.
Yeah.
Well, I'm doing 2 parallel classes that go one step at a time, and
I'm pretty well booked up till the end of March. I'm still waiting for my surgery, but I've got the rest of the year open. Just keep it in mind.
I'll have to go back and look at what I did there, because that was sort of halfway in between my 2-hour intro video and my 15, 20, 30 lesson class. And I'm not quite sure how to go beyond those in a single thing, but we can talk about it. I'd be more than happy to spread the word.
Get a cape and tights. You can do it in a single bound.
Oh, I was thinking with the beard and a Santa Claus hat.
Yeah, there you go.
Get around the world pretty quickly.
Okay, so what you're saying is book you in for next December, right?
Well, you got me booked on something else in a few weeks, so we'll be playing that. Oh, yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, I've got you as identifying sequence difficulty and how to fix it. That's on the 7th of February.
I've got it in my calendar, but not in my head. I do know that I'm impressed that you can book that far in advance, because I know what we're doing next week. I think you'll be happy.
Well, I'm kind of hoping that I only booked that far. I had a number of sessions up after that, but I'm hoping that I get the surgery done somewhere around the end of March. April,
Actually,
so hopefully that'll happen.
I've been impressed with what Dan and I have come up with since what, March, April, something like that, and not planning many weeks in advance. Sometimes the Friday before I say, well, I'm going to have to pull out one of my things out of reserve, but it's been quite a season, guys. It's been quite educational, entertaining, etc. Thank you guys that come back regularly. Thank you guys for bringing new people in. Thank you guys for presenting that too.
Well, what I like about yours, and actually works on mine as well, is talks like this lead to a follow-up session. Like, I'm really looking forward to this hashtag concept that you're talking about.
You mean you're not looking forward to my simplified facing lines?
Absolutely no, but it's the hashtag concept that I hear about. It's one of the things that when you look up, you find absolutely nothing on it. You find hash calling, but you find nothing on it other than what you may have posted. I haven't delved through the depths of your archive yet, Clark, but one of these days I'll go through it. But as you say, you're into, what do you call them? Mega terabytes or maxi bytes or whatever of data.
Petabytes.
Petabytes. Haven't got that far yet.
Did you say data bytes?
Peta, P-E-T.
Peta.
Well, I was thinking data bytes, just many bytes of data. No. All righty.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to leave, guys. Thank you for keeping me entertained for a couple of hours. And
thank you all. I will, I'll get these things posted and try to get the resources that I have got so far into the chat. And if anybody else has more, send them.
Awesome. Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Somebody said that Grand Tour link didn't come through. I've just reposted it.
That one went straight to me. So the one you just reposted ended up there. And I'm, well, we'll toss it in at the end of the discussion. Yeah. And yeah, at some point I will go through all of the little snippets that I've written for Alamand Left and actually put them in some sort of order so that I can find anything on there.
Now, somebody was asking me if I've done an index for Behind the Mic. Our January edition coming. I said, well, is there an index that has all of the articles by, topic and collated? I said, you know, we've been producing that since 2016 with something like about 20 to 30 articles every edition, plus the color supplements. I'm going, oh my God, it's right. We haven't, and they're not all hyperlinked.
Well, and yeah, actually, one of the things that I want to get a workflow going so that I can do OCR on things, so that like the PDFs, I could find a way to index. But yeah, it's huge.
Well, we started putting the hyperlinks on the index of BTM, but unfortunately, for some reason, because it goes from us like back and forth between Barry and myself, but then it also goes to other callers, and then people will send us stuff which we have to convert. They've got their own hyperlinks in it already, which we have to convert because we use A4 over here, not letter.
Right.
And then of course then there's always the spelling, color and neighbor, and sometimes it's a nightmare. But a lot of times the hyperlinks on the index will work great on the document, but it's linked to, for some reason, the hyperlink in the last edition reads my F drive as where to go rather than in the document. When you post it on the web, it goes searching for the F drive on my computer, and I'm going,
So how do I get to that? Your F drive on your computer?
Well, you need to get a compilation with a rotating index password that changes daily.
I can do that.
I forgot I had that on my computer when I moved here from Canada, because I had it set up for doing work, and I had to take my computer to get it serviced, and I forgot. I gave him the password and whatnot to get in and access. I forgot that the password changed every day. And if you know the key, it's easy, but the tech guys, they said they would get right to it. I said, okay, well, I'll pick it up on the weekend. And they were trying like a nightmare to get into this computer. Every time they logged on, the password changed.
When I sent my laptop away for service, I had set up a simple account that, that was easy to log into. But because I never logged into it, I couldn't remember the password for that. And I didn't want to give away my secure password for the encrypted version. So, yeah.
I want to talk to you about adding another program on here. My wife does a wonderful program on flyers and how to create really good flyers. And she's done that at nationals and that kind of thing. I'd like to do it on this forum. So how can I schedule that?
I'll talk to Don about it, and we'll
because she does a wonderful job of that, and what not to do, things not to do on flyers and that kind of stuff. Things to do on flyers.
Things to do, yes. Yeah, it's actually one trying out the experience we've had trying a bunch of different graphical designs on flyers here in Petaluma and seeing what works and what doesn't.
Oh, I know.
It has been fascinating.
We'll go back and pick up some of her old flaggers that she used to do for our club when it was in Marin County. You'll get some good ideas.
Maybe even website design.
Well, the biggest thing I can suggest is stop using PDFs or not PDFs. What the hell is the freaking word? PNG files.
Oh, PNG files? PICs, PNG, yeah.
Stop using them. They're so freaking big.
Mm-hmm.
They do nothing but take up wasted space when a JPEG will do.
But yeah, Mike commented about website design. That's its own beast. I think the big thing we found on flyers was that the less formal, more playful closer you could get to a handwritten look, the better we got the demographic that we were looking for. So yeah, a lot of the suggestions that we've seen on flyers did not get us the demographic we were looking for.
Right.
And the things that almost looked handwritten, I've got a couple of fonts that go that way.
Any
but they're very
suggestions, Aaron?
whimsical. Were the ones that
So
got the
basically
crowd
what
in
you're
really-
saying is the less professional, the more takers are the people you want.
No,
Yeah, the
I
more
think the
whimsy.
more professional is, the more it
Well,
attracts people.
guys, this is Erin. I'm over here on the
Hi,
side.
Aaron.
Just want to tell you that I was in graphics for 45 years.
Cool.
Okay? And
She had to brag.
I'm trying to explain. I have a little bit of background. What my seminar is about is not about this is how you should make your flyer. This is about do's and don'ts. And I use examples of things that have problems, and it's very interactive. And I have everybody say, okay, what about this, format do you think is not a good idea? Why do you think that? And everybody gets involved. So, but there are some very, very old school rules about designing things like that that have been proven over and over again over the years to be, this is a very good idea. This is a very poor idea. And
Things to do with pictures, for example.
yeah, well, there's more than I can tell you in just a couple of seconds. But the point being that whether you design something that looks handwritten or whether you design something that looks very modern, and there are certain rules that make all the difference. There are certain practices you can follow that really make a huge difference. And again, I've done this seminar at Nationals a couple times, and it always is a packed house. So if you guys are interested, I'd be glad to do it. I just need a little bit of warning so I can prepare everything for sharing the screen and being able to show examples.
Awesome. I will coordinate with Don on this.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and there is no question, Dan, but you have to know your own market.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You have to know your own market. And I can give you some things, okay, you never do this and you never do that. But in the end, you have to know who you're looking for and the area where you are, because they're all going to have different things that attract people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I never tell people, what you're doing is not going to work, because guess what? Just the minute you tell someone something's not going to work,
it will.
Then it does. So, anyway, I'm going away again, boys.
Cool.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, I'll fire off a message to Don, and we'll figure out how to fit that in.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Cool. And
I think it'll be useful to the group.
Yeah, I'm kind of targeting possibly late 2021, but really early to mid 2022 for a restart.
In Petaluma, I had at least 3 squares of those type of people.
Yeah, it was interesting. That group folded just about the time I started square dancing.
Right.
And they helped us. We got a few of them on the restart, and then they kind of petered off.
Yeah. Well,
which is okay, because we're going for a different demographic than that was.
Yeah, it's a matter of how you keep them. Yeah. So you have to pique their interest.
Yeah, and they're not interested in bringing another group of newbies up. They were like, yeah, we just want to go Dance Plus. And so, okay,
right,
great.
exactly.
You guys go to San Rafael or Santa Rosa and go Dance Plus. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's, yep. I have run into some of those people, but
yes,
our demographics don't really intersect.
Probably not.
There's a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
My kids are still dancing. They're all out there.
Yeah, that was interesting, because I talked to the president of the Adobe Squares back around the time I was starting to call, so probably 2014. Okay.
Fred.
2 years after I started dancing, and he said, yeah, the kids were great energy, but they're not revenue, and once they go off to college, they're gone.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Or they get mobile. In other words, they get a car and they're gone.
Right. Yeah. Well, which is if we want to rebuild square dancing, we have to be the place where people go to get laid.
Yeah.
So that when they get a car, they come to us, and that's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I've got house projects to do. I need to go see if any sporting goods store have some weights so I can get my exercise going. I'm going to bail out of here and catch you all next week.
Have fun.
Cool.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.